Welcome back to the Rake series of Gentlemen's London, where today we're going to be doing things a little bit different. We're tacking from micro to macro, looking at this nation's nichest shop with the most beautiful and intricate and historical trinkets available, but then linking it to our largest state occasion. This is the Armoury of St James and the King's Birthday Parade, also known as Trooping the Colour. The thing about the Armoury of St James is that it is a bit unlike anything anywhere else in the world. However, if you were going to find it anywhere, you would want to and you would expect to find it here on the Piccadilly Arcade. So what the Armoury of St James is specialised in is militaria. Now, militaria from a British history point of view is an essential part of our kind of cultural consciousness, and the journey that you go through when you come to somewhere like this, where you see the older regiments and the dedications to various battles and eras, kind of allow you to trace our history through its military, which a lot of Brits would argue is ultimately the essential journey that you could take. The only other one really is the royal family, and the two are very closely connected. And crucially, what it does as well is it follows along that very British tradition of antiquing. We are a nation of hoarders. We love to keep older things in our houses. We like to collect. That's why around this area there are a lot of galleries and first edition bookshops, all these sorts of things. This is where they all are, and they know that this is where people come to look for that kind of thing. It's very popular. This is by far the nichest of that, which is why it becomes so special. Now, it's purely a matter of taste. If you aren't into this kind of thing, don't come here. But I have always found that somewhere like this holds a kind of romance because of the stories that each of the items tell. So you have, for example, in this shop, you have signed photographs of Winston Churchill that used to be owned by Churchill's own cipher clerks. So everything that you can get here, and you really can buy everything in the shop, has a story behind it. And that is such a critical part about our island nation's history, is our capacity to maintain narrative and story within the kind of breadcrumbs and trinkets that have been left behind from the years gone by. We've spoken before about how at places like Purdy you can see the damage from the bombs of the Blitz, but these are somehow that much more tangible because first you can come here and you can take them home in a way that you can't take home dents in pillars and shops in Mayfair, but also you can be very selective about what story resonates to you and your house that you want to bring home with you. Okay, so for example, I have a couple of items here which are particularly interesting. So from the left, we have the glorious 11th Hussars. I've spoken to you before about the 11th Hussars when we were at Swain, because they were making the cats for the King's Royal Hussars. Now, the King's Royal Hussars are, I think it's about 4 regiments that ultimately got amalgamated into the King's Royal Hussars. One of them was the 11th Hussars, and the 11th Hussars were known as the cherry pickers. Why is that? Well, they were ambushed in a cherry orchard, and then they were given the crimson livery when Prince Albert came to the UK to marry Queen Victoria, and he was so impressed by the turnout of this regiment, and his livery was this crimson, that he donated this colour to the regiment. So it's why you see they wear it very proudly in both their number 1 uniform and their number 2 uniform and on their caps. And on the reverse of here, they have this crimson leather that is sort of emblematic of the regiment, and even several hundred years later, it still is a real source of pride for those who serve in that regiment. And what we have here, for example, is this unbelievable table lighter on a gimbal for if you were out on the ocean and you need to make sure that it stays upright, that was donated to a Victoria Cross winner. And then here we have a bust of King George V. You may remember from our Purdy episode that he is my absolute favourite constitutional monarch. Pretty benign, stamp collector, terrific shot, and he also sported the best of the Romanov Windsor beards. And this bust has a replica which sits on King Charles's desk, and indeed in a Vanity Fair article recently you could see it on his desk when he was photographed there. Here, of course, we have the great Winston Churchill. Churchill remains an incredibly popular figure, so as I say, there are signed pictures of him here. There are, there are those very popular porcelain bulldogs which aren't him and yet sort of are. And so, someone like here, if you're a fan of Churchill, this is the place to come to find things of actual historical note. This is my favourite. This is a letter opener. And if you're going to have a letter opener in your life these days, snail mail is a rare thing, but if you're going to receive a letter, you're going to want to open it with this. As you can see with the hilt, it harks back to the sort of Jacobean days where men with their skein dukes and their kilts, raising them aloft for good old Bonnie Prince Charlie. When you're growing up as a British child, these sorts of things are in history books, and so to have one rather neatly plonked in your on your desk to open letters, I think is incredibly smart. Now, there's one more thing that I want to show you because it kind of leads on to what we're doing next. As I say, we're going here in this video from the micro to the macro, and the central state occasion in this nation is called Trooping the Colour. And here we have what you will see upstairs, very unusually, these little toy soldiers. They're metal cast, they are hand painted, and in a Mayfair St James's shop, unusually you can get them for as little as £12. But the point is that they reflect our culture and our history. So you walk past the shop, and whilst it doesn't really make sense to have figurines in the window, at the same time it makes perfect sense. So when we look at this saluting lieutenant, we go from this model to real life, as when we go down to Horse Guards Parade, a historical icon coming to life in 2024. So this is the Mall. The oxidized iron treatment that makes the tarmac red is meant to look like a red carpet that leads all the way to Buckingham Palace. The Mall is 1,160 paces long, so the British Army, or at least the Household Division, set their quick march timing to 116 paces a minute, and so it means that marching down the Mall takes exactly 10 minutes, and with that in mind they could perfectly time the pace of Trooping the Colour. So after a short walk from St James's, we have arrived at Horse Guards Parade. Now, when this was originally built by Henry VIII, it was meant as a jousting field. So the field we see in front of us, this is originally intended for jousting tournaments. Nowadays, however, it performs the major functions of state, and the central heart of that, in the middle of the year, you have what's called Trooping the Colour. Now, just a quick explanation about what Horse Guards Parade is today, other than what we'll see at Trooping the Colour. It really is the heart of the functions of state now in the United Kingdom. So over here you have the trees, which is the garden for 10 Downing Street, so you can't see 10 Downing Street from here, but it is there. Around us you have everything from the Armoury buildings, you have the Ministry of Defence, and of course Whitehall, which stretches all the way down to Parliament and then Trafalgar Square on this side. Now the arches behind me were initially the official entrance to St James's Palace. So St James's Park, which is behind us, all of this was royal grounds, and St James's Palace over there. Now remember, before Buckingham Palace, St James's Palace was the central court of the United Kingdom, which is why still today when ambassadors come to the UK, they are ambassadors to the court of St James, not to Buckingham Palace. And then finally onto this side we have the Foreign Office. So it is the central part of state, and then the monarchy is honoured here on their birthday parade, which is usually in the middle of June. So it used to be that Trooping the Colour was held on the actual birthday of the sovereign. You may have heard about the fact that the monarch in the UK has 2 birthdays. This is why. What happened was Edward VII, who became king in 1901, he had his birthday in November. Now, he didn't really want a big parade in November because he thought it's not going to be very good weather. He wants better weather. So he decided to hold it in June, which is why we today still have it in June. So the actual idea of Trooping the Colour, which is a military exercise, is when the colour, which is the flag that represents the history and heritage of the regiment, is trooped in front of the soldiers, which means that it's marched in front of them so they can all look at it and recognise it. The point of it initially was that in battle, when it was very smoky, very dusty, very loud, very disorientating, they would be able to know where to rally if the time comes behind their own flag. So it wasn't an actual state event until 1760, and then in 1889 it became what we will see today. So I'm going to take you through exactly what is happening in the parade, so when you watch it you kind of know what's going on. So where we're standing now is more or less where the mass bands will be standing. You'll see these huge number of musicians carrying instruments all the way from these vast drums to tiny piccolos. Behind will be rows of soldiers in, well, it will look like an L shape. So one of the more impressive parts of the parade is of course the arrival of the royal family. They come in their numbers, a lot of them on horseback, alongside members of the military and the royal household who hold particular places behind in the parade. So everything from what's called gold stick and silver stick. Gold stick, there are 2 of them, you'll notice, because they're holding sticks with gold heads on them, and those are their sticks of office, and they are Princess Anne and a former commander of the Household Cavalry who will be riding the closest to the sovereign, and the job of Gold Stick historically, all the way back to the Tudors, is to be the closest bodyguard to the sovereign. So when they arrive, they'll come around the parade square and take their places at the top by the arches. Then there'll be the inspection, so they'll come right past. The Queen Elizabeth was known for having a really, really good eye for detail and picking up the officers who are commanding the troop back in Buckingham Palace at the end of the parade if something wasn't quite up to scratch. I imagine King Charles is just as keen-eyed as she was, and he will be looking as he goes past all the troops on parade. However, the Household Division is known for being completely immaculate, so hopefully it's only minor infractions. Now, on the far right will be what's called Escort for the Colour. They will be the ones who march off to collect the colour that will then be trooped in front of everybody else. The reason they're on the far right and they will march off to the Grenadier March is because traditionally on the far right of every formation will be a Grenadier company. Now, they will come and march around to this point here, where they will stand to attention and they will await the receiving of the colour from the Regimental Sergeant Major of the Guards Regiment. Remember, there are 5 regiments of foot guards: the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, the Irish Guards, the Welsh Guards and the Scots Guards. You can identify the Guards Regiments by their buttoning. So on the red tunics that they wear, the Grenadier Guards will wear straight buttoning as per usual. The Coldstream Guards will wear buttons by 2, the Scots Guards by 3, the Irish Guards by 4 and the Welsh Guards by 5. The colour will be received from the RSM, and the escort for the colour will become the escort to the colour, and they will then march it in slow time through the company of soldiers, who will then take their place at the back at the end, and then there will be what's called the slow march. Now what comes next is what's called the flourish. Now the flourish is when the ensign, who is usually the youngest officer at the time in the regiment, will have the duty of flourishing the flag in front of the king. So he lifts it up, he puts it out to the side and then brings it round to the front. The idea is that it doesn't touch the ground, just keep an eye out whether it does or not. But his job is to flourish it beautifully in front of the king, and then it will be taken back round, and then they will all march around again in quick time. After that, you have the turn of the horses. You have the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, who will go around with their guns to the back. The colour for the Royal Horse Artillery is the gun itself, and the first one that's going to go past, which is the colour, was fired at the Battle of the Somme, so it's a very special item and one to keep an eye out for. Following that, the Household Cavalry will go past, both in slow and then in quick time. Now, the Household Cavalry, of course, there are two of them. There's the Blues and Royals, and then there's the Lifeguards. You can distinguish them between the fact that the Blues and Royals wear blue with the red plumes on top of their helmets, and the Lifeguards wear red and white. As I say, this is a state occasion, so Britain goes on show. You have dignitaries for both military and political from across the world here, whether they are ambassadors, high-ranking military chiefs, whatever it is. And so here they are watching Britain PLC do its bit, and no one will do it better than the Household Division. Once the parade is done, there's then the march back to Buckingham Palace. So the King gets back into his carriage and the Household Cavalry ride down the Mall, and all the soldiers who are on parade will march down the Mall too. The King will then take his place at the gates of Buckingham Palace, where there'll be a final march past and salute. He'll get up to the balcony when there will then be a flyover to mark the end of the birthday parade of the King by the RAF. Shall I have my glass on or not? Hold on. Yes, lads. Oh yeah, typical.